And then you can see the perfect reason why I'm calling this out is because they're on the same screen. Wait, I'm confused. Now we have two light bulb icons which do different things with different functions. And that's confusing. It is Carl T. Rogers, UX researcher and designer, helping you become better at what you do in the UX world. And today, I want to take you through an exploration of one of my favorite apps that I decided to redesign. I'm going to be looking at the Mango app for language learning, an app that I really like and have used for several years now. And so I'm going to take you through kind of first my process of evaluating it from kind of a, not just a heuristic evaluation perspective, but also kind of design best practices and also my experience as a user, kind of an N of one as far as user feedback, and then incorporating that into the redesign process. And then I'll show you kind of a before and after of kind of how things have changed within my, redesign of it. So because most of my experience has been more on the UX side and less on the UI side, I decided to challenge myself to redesign an app that I have used for years within the bounds of its existing design system. What can I do from a UI perspective to enhance the UX while not changing too much of the existing design language? And so that's what I want to take you through today. So first thing I did was take a bunch of screenshots to review, kind of how the app works and focus in on the key parts of the experience that I wanted to look at and also the design elements of those experiences. And then I dropped those into Figma and kind of went through with my red pen, so to speak, to try and figure out, what's working, what's not working, and what do I think I could change, and especially think about why. That's always the big thing, whether you're doing user research for the experience overall, or you're looking at something like this, where it's more about, very specific pixel, changes and color and alignment of things, and see what needs to change and why does it need to change so that it'll actually help the experience. Because you can make something look prettier, so to speak, or you can make it look more modern, but if it doesn't really change the experience much, then, what's the point? What's the bottom line? Learning several languages here on Mango, and this is what it looks like after you land on the languages that you've already started to learn. So it's got this selection down here to kind of swipe through the language courses that you're doing. But if you see here, there's like kind of like this big gap of space up here. It seemed kind of weird. I guess they're trying to balance things visually, but it just, especially given the image in the background, it just felt like a very odd gap, especially when you think about these important buttons right here. Like this is the most important button, resume, right? To resume, to keep learning. And that kind of needs to be closer to the person's thumb. They've already got these buttons closer to the thumb, but this one, which is even more important, is not near the thumb, right? So it's like this one also needs to be down here. But in addition to that, they've got this button, which is like danger zone. Like you can either keep learning or you can completely delete all of your progress, and those buttons are right beside each other. So it could very easily lead to a user error where you're trying to keep learning, but instead you accidentally delete or almost delete the course. Now, I'm sure that there's probably like a second step after that, like, are you sure? But even to get to that would be not very good, right? So that was, I think, a big thing for me. And also this name here, Scottish Gaelic and Scottish Gaelic. That doesn't tell us any extra information, right? And as somebody who does learn multiple languages, and I've even got a separate YouTube channel about my language learning journey. That's one of the reasons why I'm on this app. If you're curious about language learning and you'd like to see kind of what I'm doing with that, you can check out Carl's Lingo Kingdom. That's one of my other channels. Normally, when you're learning a language like this, one of the first things you learn is how to refer to that language in that language, right? Like if you're taking a Spanish class, it's Español. It seems like there's a chance here to have Scottish Gaelic in Scottish Gaelic, which is Gaelic. I do like, the little icon that they have for the language, and every language has its own unique icons like that. But then these parts right here, like completed lessons and time spent, hours, minutes, seconds, I don't think this data really tells us very much contextually, right? Like, is 5 hours and 38 minutes and 48 seconds actually helpful? Is it useful? Do I need to know the seconds? And then especially, even more important, completed lessons, 20. Is 20 a lot? Is 20 not a lot? I don't really have that context, right? So it really, a lot of these things that, you might think would be up to subjective interpretation as far as, well, what looks better? What colors do I like? Things like that. In the UI, really, it comes down to basics of heuristics, getting those decision-making patterns and user flows really down pat, and giving the user the information that they need in order to complete those tasks. And one last thing about this screen, and the reason why I'm spending so much time on this screen is because it is, like the first entryway into whatever that language is that you're working on. And that is, it says resume. But the problem is, when you click resume, it doesn't take you into a language lesson. Instead, it takes you into the course for that language. Is there a better way to kind of set the mental model up for what's going to be the next step? Because this is what you actually land on in the next step if you hit resume. It's not a lesson, like it's kind of into here. And if you think about the equivalent that a lot of people are familiar with would be Duolingo. Duolingo, for example, basically, when you go into your language, it basically skips to their equivalent of this, the language learning path. And actually, it's almost like this, where you can skip to individual lessons. You're in the language, and then it takes you to your next lesson and topic. But this has so many more screens than that. And so it's a key thing to step back and say, not only does this screen look okay, but also, does this screen even need to be here? Is it providing context and information in this experience that's actually relevant and needed for the end goal of the user? So you get to this page, then we're taken to Scottish Gaelic main units. You can see that same picture again. You can actually tell what it is now. And then it says the basics. There are 10 chapters and 85 lessons, and it shows you how much you've completed. So this part's cool, but honestly, you don't really get a lot here, especially since this looks weird. It looks very empty right here because there's only this one unit, right? There's only one unit. And the reason why that looks weird is because this language in Mango doesn't have a ton of content compared to some of the other languages. So some of the other ones in here will have multiple units, and so it makes sense to have this page because there's, unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, unit 4. There's a lot of stuff. But with this one, there's only one, so it looks kind of blank. But then when you open up the unit, then you can see, okay, here's all the different lessons. Here are the subjects of those lessons, and here's how much you've completed. So that makes sense. So if you then click into one of the lessons, let's click into chapter 1, Salutations and Small Talk, which has already been completed. Then you have this layout right here. Okay, but what else are we doing within Salutations and Small Talk? Or is it the same thing over and over again? Is it not? So I kind of think maybe there could be a place for more detail. Maybe there doesn't need to be a place for more detail. And this is where, if you were this was an actual project with an actual team, you would want to do, research with actual users, not just yourself as the user. In this case, I am a user. Not just a researcher, but working either for your organization or on behalf of a client. This is where one of the areas where that research would come in, and you would need more than just your own opinion. Another thing that I thought was odd is this: do you want to learn offline? Download all. And these are these little download buttons here. And that's another thing where you would need to check with all the people that use it, or even go into your analytics and see, are people actually using this function? Do they find it useful? Is it not really that big a deal? Because again, the thing that most people are used to, and the reason why I bring up Duolingo again, is because that is the mental model that is going to be most familiar and most popular to users of these other language learning apps. Is this a thing in Duolingo? No. It's just always there, right? Now you have to be connected to the internet, but most people have data where they have Wi-Fi or whatever, and so that's why it's not really a thing for Duolingo. But this is designed, I think, more for people who are traveling and may not have access to the internet. So once again, that is an area of research. You need to find out, is this usable? Does this need to be here? And if so, should we move it somewhere else? And finally, the other thing down here, which is we've got vocabulary and we've got chapter recap. But vocabulary is down here in a tab, and then there's review. So we've got the word vocabulary, which is here. Then we have the word review, which is here, but is a different section. So what are we reviewing if not vocabulary? There's some disambiguation that needs to happen in the UX copy here, because it looks like vocab, this could take me either to here or to here. I don't know, right? But chapter recap, especially since I've already completed all of these, right? We've got this green check mark. You've done all of these. Can I do this chapter recap? Have I already done it? I don't know. And it doesn't tell me. This is the kind of thing where, again, going back to Duolingo and other similar apps, it seems like this is something that you would have to unlock, right? Almost to motivate the user and to say, you can't do this recap until you've done all these lessons. And then after that, then you can do this lesson. But then there's another thing that you'll see later on, which is present in some of the lessons, which is not easily accessible here, and that's grammar notes. And we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so what if we clicked on a different one? The lessons haven't been completed. What does that screen look like? So we go to chapter 4 in unit 1. Okay, so you can see this play icon, which you've already seen down here. And that is the way to instantly take yourself into a lesson. So you can get to your next lesson, or the lesson that you left off on if you left in the middle of one, by just clicking this button. So that's good. That's good. That seems like something we should probably hang on to in some form or another. Let's download all. You can see the download color is tied to the play color. So there's this, they're trying to link like the idea of downloading and, you know, going through the content. You can tell, you know, they've got this visual language where this is black because it's been downloaded and it's ready to go, whereas these are gray because they've not been downloaded. And none of them are green because they've not been completed. So, you know, that hierarchy seems to work pretty well. But again, some of the other issues that we already looked at. Then if you do click this tab, vocabulary tab, we're not sure about the difference between vocabulary and review, since vocabulary also says review, then this is what that page looks like. Vocabulary with Mango curated vocab cards, or creating your own vocab cards. I've used this app for years. I didn't know I could create my own cards because there is no visual affordance to tell me I can make my own cards, right? This is where something as simple as just a plus button, right? A plus icon where it looks like, oh, I can add something, I can make something, I can write something. Oh, okay, so I can make my own. And then review that like my own SRS, like spaced repetition system. And then the Mango vocabulary, again, how many vocabulary words or sentences are created by Mango? Is it related to just this chapter and unit? Is it for the whole thing? I don't know, because that information, that context is not there. Then you click review, and then again, now it's telling me, okay, there's 41 cards for review, which are from all these other lessons, and you can hit start review. But once again, like before, the button is really far away from your thumb. The only thing that's close by is do a current lesson and not a review. It's called cards, so it makes me think there would be some kind of card symbol potentially. But then the cards are also used over here with the vocab cards. So are these review cards the same as vocab cards? This is unclear. So this is the kind of stuff that you have to be looking at when you're doing some type of heuristic evaluation, whether you're going to be doing UI design or not. So you can kind of see how these little bits and pieces that are in here actually contribute to the overall vision of the, you know, the user experience. So we've gone over what some of these introductory screens look like. We've now looked at what it looks like before you go into a lesson. Now, if you actually click that magical purple button and take you into a lesson that's in flight, so to speak, what does that look like? Well, it looks like this. So it shows you a progress bar to show you how far along you are in the lesson. You've got 24 out of 48 parts of the lesson. Okay, that makes sense. I like that. You've got this play button up here if you want to do this hands-free, which is actually pretty useful because then you can kind of put it in your car and you don't have to like clicking. It'll just kind of go through it and it'll pause so that you can say the phrase out loud. Kind of like with another language learning app that I've tested, which is Glossica. It's giving you like a hint here as to the formality or informality, which you're going to run into in some of these languages, like in Gaelic and even in Japanese, of course, with like cable. So that's good. It's showing you this countdown timer on how long you have to think of the answer to this. It's got a show answer button. So all of these things seem to be, you know, they seem to work really well. And I've used this kind of system and it is effective in that way. And it's also giving you a hint as to what you're doing right here. It's critical thinking. However, this lesson or this question is not about critical thinking. Critical thinking, in this case, is from the perspective of the instructional designer said, this is a critical thinking question. That's helpful for an instructional designer. It is not helpful for the language learner, right? Because then it's sending a confusing signal, right? Critical thinking, but then hotel. Now, maybe a user could get used to this and then they know, oh, critical thinking, I'm going to have to remember everything that has been said and then remix what I've learned to create my own new sentence. And that's the critical thinking aspect. But again, why wouldn't this be something like places and directions? Because that's the unit that you're in, or the chapter rather. That seems to be much more straightforward to me. Then we've also got the spacing issue where, you know, the back and the necks are really big and they're near your thumb, but the show answer is not. So there's issues there. It seems like there's some unused space, right, that could be useful. And moving on, there's also a dark mode, which I had to just find by playing around with things. I didn't even realize there was a dark mode. So that's nice. You can see they've got some core settings in here. That's helpful. You can turn the narrator off and on. Most of that seems all right. So then if you click show answer or you click next, let's see what happens. It shows the answer. Excuse me, where is the hotel? So it's showing you the answer in the language and it's giving you a recording of the answer from a native speaker. So that's really good. And it's good because this stays in the same place, so you get that reveal of this is where it was. It's got these little buttons right here so that you can hear the recording again if you want. If you want to hear Gav of Maleshgal, that again. It's got this redo button if you want to redo the question and quiz yourself again, give yourself that timer again. It's got this little microphone button so that you can record your own voice and then compare it at the same time with the recording. That's a really cool feature that I've not seen very often. So I crossed this out just because it's like, yeah, that's really good. Let's not change that at all. I am curious though, what would happen if you hit the share button with this? Does that mean you can download your own recording compared to the other? Does it like combine them into a file? Do people even use that, right? Once again, got to go back to the research, got to go back to the analytics to see. So that makes pretty good sense. There's still the kind of the spacing issue, but in addition, there's also a couple of other things that I want to point out to you. First of all, is the really cool way that Mango has laid out their color scheme for language learners. And this is, I think, one of the strengths of Mango, especially from a visual design perspective, and that is they have color coordinated the parts of the sentences with different colors. So Gav of Maleshkal means excuse me, and you can tell that because they are the same color. Ach is where, Avel is is the, hotel is Tai Osta. So you can tell based on the coloring, oh, okay, this part of this sentence is equivalent to this part of this sentence. And it really helps you to figure out the structure of the language yourself without it being a formalized, lesson. And so that is one of the really good things about Mango, and one of the things that this redesign needs to maintain or improve on even, if that's possible. And then another thing that you can also do in this lesson section is you can tap on these words and it will show you, once again with the color coordination, a rough transliteration, so to speak, or very vague pronunciation guide of using English orthography. How would you pronounce Leshkal? Yeshkiel, right? And it's trying to show you the emphasis and everything like that. I think this is problematic since you could have several people read this, and even though it is spelled out in a more or less English orthographic way, they're still going to say it differently than the actual word. That aside, this can be helpful, I think, for some people, especially depending on the language that you're learning. But problems can happen when you're going to do a word that's on a different line, and then it's covering up this other word. So Gavavmo Tai Oastu. Tai Oastu. Tai Osta is how you say it. But regardless, it's covering up the sentence there. So I don't like that part of it, right? So there's another spacing issue. Moving on, another thing, and you notice I mentioned this earlier, and that is the grammar note. It says 31 of 48. Did you notice how the word teich in teich osta and teich b, and then you can click on it and see, the larger grammar note, right? Which is right here. You got like our guest house and food house, right? So this is actually really important, especially when it's talking about cultural notes as well, which often come up in the Japanese course. They're super important for helping understand the context of what a lot of these phrases mean and the intentions behind them. But you can't access those unless you go through the lesson. And so that's why I set up here, I can look at vocabulary, I can review the chapter, but why can't I look at the grammar notes? Those are really helpful. I want to be able to get to those easily and have them all in a list. And so that's why I think that should go over here so that it is accessible, because otherwise it's just buried inside these lessons. And the only way to get back to it is to go through the lesson step by step by step. A couple more things that I want us to look at, which is kind of more on the finer UI design type stuff. As you move on in a lesson, sometimes there will be a speaking quiz. And again, speaking quiz versus critical thinking, don't know the answer, right? Excuse me, where's the hotel? And there's a countdown timer versus where's the restaurant? There's a countdown timer. What's the difference? Don't know, doesn't matter. And that's why these little headers up here, like I said, are not really helpful with the way that they're laid out right now, because they're showing an instructional designer's perspective rather than a user's perspective. But the reason I wanted to show you this is you can see they've got this little toggle here, right? A light bulb and then a little note thing. So what does that do? So this little toggle rearranges the prompt sentence to show you either literal or understood meanings. And so this can be good, especially when there's like not a one-to-one translation in what you're trying to say and what you're thinking of in English or whatever your native language is. And so this toggle is actually really good because you can kind of toggle back and forth to see what am I trying to say and what does this literally mean? Because literally it is, where is a restaurant? Waar terwijl een teich be, but the understood meaning in where is there a restaurant? Where if we said the literal version in English, it wouldn't really make sense. But if you turn it into the understood meaning, you can kind of see what it's supposed to say and what it's supposed to mean. It's just worded differently because it's a different language with a different set of mental models. So that's really good. What's the problem with it? Well, if you look at a different card right here, now we have another light bulb. It's a different light bulb, but it's still a light bulb. So this light bulb is different because if you click on it, it says slides with a light bulb will be added to daily review. Daily review, where have we seen that? Oh, right, that was up here. Daily review. Okay, so that goes to review with the little light bulb. There's no light bulb on here. And this says 41 cards due for review. But right here, this says slides will be added to daily review. Is it a card or is it a slide? Are they the same thing? I'm not sure. Maybe they are. And then you can see the perfect reason why I'm calling this out is because they're on the same screen. Two light bulbs on the same screen, different designs with different meanings, right? Wait, I'm confused. Now we have two light bulb icons which do different things with different functions. And that's confusing. Even if both of the functions here are good, the way they are expressed to the user through those visual affordances are not good because they require disambiguation. It adds further to that mental load, right? Which you really don't want the users to have. You want them to be focused on the task that they're trying to accomplish rather than figuring out how to accomplish the task. So now you can see all of these issues that I laid out here with Mango, the good things and the bad things, because like I said, I still really like this app. I think what Mango is doing is great because they've got a lot of languages on here that are not supported on a lot of other platforms. You know, Duolingo does have some endangered heritage languages, but I think there's even some that Mango has that Duolingo does not. And so for that reason, I think they're to be applauded. And I still, really like the app. But it's like, let's take something good and let's make it even better. So now I'm going to take you screen by screen and kind of show you the changes I made and also some of a little bit of iterations that I've got with some of these that I saved. You can kind of see my thought process of kind of experimenting and iterating. And then after that, I'll show you a side-by-side so you can really see the before and after of what it was before and how it's changed. First thing you should look at here is the background image is different. And again, background image is not a big deal, but this one actually has a focal point that you can look at and tell what it is. This is a famous landmark in Scotland in a Gaelic-speaking area. And it also has this path, so that visually reinforces that idea of you're learning, you're going to Scotland in your mind to learn this language, right? And then you have the name of the language in that language, Gaelic. And then we've got, not just 20 lessons have been completed, but 20 out of 85. Oh, that gives me context. Quarter of the way through almost. And then got a little clock here. You've spent 5 hours and 38 minutes learning this. Research figures out that users really like that stat and they have something they can do with it, or they just like seeing it, then we keep it there. And then look at this. We've got this typical iPhone pattern, and you could use it, in an Android system as well. I'm on an iPhone to swipe between the languages, and then still you're left with a lot of room near the user's thumbs for the two main actions, right? Either resume a lesson or a daily review. Because before, it was really hard to get to daily review, and it shows you a number of how many review options are left. Because sometimes, once again, going back to Duolingo or Glossico or these other things, sometimes you just have time when you want to review what you've learned, and sometimes you actually want to learn something new. And some people will do both in the same session, right? But it's good to have those two main tasks that people are using right there on the first screen. Before I go and show you what the next screen is, let's look at what some of my iterations were with trying to figure out how to show all this information, right? But also declutter things a bit. First, I tried something like this. Then I tried something like this with these longer bars. Then I tried this overlay. Then I tried switching, the layout of your language and then learning, or learning and then language, so this kind of iteration is just kind of par for the course. And then after doing all these, then I landed on this, so that this information is minimized both visually and mentally. It's less important, but it's still there if you want it. It's partially transparent. And then these are the main tasks, and they are the most visually important. Now, once you click on it and it goes into this, and we just got Unit 1. Here's all the chapters. You see these tabs have been taken away because daily review was already back here. Now, maybe somebody would want to do daily review again, and they don't want to have to click back and go here. So maybe daily review could be put here again. Maybe they do want to use those tabs that they already had. Mango would need to do their research, talk to their users, look at their analytics, and actually see if these tabs down here are really useful and if that's the best way to continue to do it. But for this redesign, I just thought, let's try it without it, right? And see what happens. A lot of this is experimentation, right? Which is one of the important things about research and design is experimenting and testing those experiments. Another thing that I noticed when I was going through the app is when you're on something like this, you're just looking at this screen, especially if you're doing multiple languages, which I am. I'm learning where I am and where I'm going, and I haven't unlocked the chapter, but what language is this? Oh, let's use that really cool icon where every language has its own badge. So if I open the app in the middle of a lesson or in a page like this, oh, yeah. This is the Gallic course. Okay, continuing on with the color coordination that they've used, tying the start purple, the play button, all of that's together. So this is the next one. It's been downloaded. So we're continuing with that. But instead of having download all often, some other place where it's going to be hard to reach, being way up there, we just put it down here. Want to learn offline? Download all. And we've actually got a download icon, right? Instead of just the word download. This section is where all the chapters are. And then this other section is where these other elements are, which originally were, kind of all mixed together. And now there's a clear delineation between the two types of things you can look at. Chapter recap, it is grayed out and it is locked, showing that you've not unlocked it yet. You can't do it yet. And then there's vocabulary review or create your own cards. And then this view would take you to the vocabulary section, right? Where once again, you can hit review, or you can see this plus sign, like I was talking about earlier, create card, and you can create your own. And so that's easily accessible right here. And then you can go back. And then grammar notes, you can read those. That was the area where there was no other way to get to it unless you're in the middle of a lesson. That's what all of these look like before you go into the lesson. Now let's see how the lessons look now that I've kind of tweaked some of the layouts. So I'm in the middle of a lesson. We still have this layout of, the color coding, where's the hotel? But I've moved this down. This main action that's going to be used is actually near someone's thumb. And there's this space here because you're expecting the answer to come in, right? And then when you get the answer, as you can see, of course, the spacing, the increased spacing helps make it to where if somebody does want to click on this, pronunciation little bubble, they can, and it's not going to cover up the other letters. But more importantly, what I think is the most seemingly basic but important change that I've made to the way the lessons work is now every different parts of the sentence are on their own lines. And it's not just, I can tell the parts of the sentence based on the color, I can also tell based on which line they're on. Excuse me is on the first line, Gav Maleshko is on the first line. And there's nothing else on that line. They're the same color and they're on the same line. So it's taking this concept that Mango's already developed and expanded on it to make it even clearer which parts of the sentence are what in target language and in the native language. These other buttons, if you want to hear it again, you want to record yourself, all that's still here and it's near the thumb. And then similarly, with some of the other things we were looking at with the understood versus literal, the toggle is now up here. Instead of everything being down in the middle, right? Now that we need this space down here to show the target language, now we've moved this up and you can tell, it's either understood or it's formal based on the toggle. And there's no more light bulb over here because we're using the light bulb here for this toggle. And instead, we say cards with a sticky note will be added to daily review. Instead of slides, it's cards. You'll see I've also changed this prompt here. It's not just okay, it's got it, right? Because okay is not very engaging. If you're going to have a button there that really just does nothing except close it, then make it more engaging. Got it. That is how I've redesigned it. Now let's see before and after. All right, the very first screen. On the left, you can see the before, and on the right, you can see the after. That delete button is now totally gone. If someone really wants to delete the course, then they can go into their settings and do it. You're not going to find on Duolingo, you're not going to find the delete button right on the main page of that language. And there's a reason for that. Resume is now closer, and daily review is here. All these different things. There's now context for how many lessons you've done. There's a better background image, all this stuff. This was actually two different screens, and I combined them into one. Now, this is a kind of case-by-case thing where if Mango ever watches this video, which I doubt they would, they might not want to do this, right? Because there are some languages where you do need two separate screens, potentially. And so it makes sense to say there's one unit and here's all the chapters. Whereas other languages, there's a bunch of units. You can see the difference here in the chapter lesson layout. Now, again, if you think there's a better way to do this, put it down in the comments. I would love to see somebody who's got a lot of experience at UI design and visual design to give some suggestions here, because UI is not, what I've normally focused on in the past. And that's why I wanted to challenge myself with this. I think this screen is okay. I think it's a little bit better than what originally was here, but I don't think it's perfect, right? I just think this is an iteration of potential design direction to, explore. Is this the best way to do it? Probably not. Is it maybe a little bit of an improvement from what was here? Yeah, I hope so, especially with the addition of grammar notes as their own section here. I mean, potentially, if you wanted to go back to the tabs again, you could even have all of this content, or rather all of this content, on one screen, and then all of this content on a different screen, and you just flip back and forth between those two tabs if you want it to be more visually streamlined and less busy. Vocabulary, again, we have all this space here, and it's all the way away from your thumb for no purpose, all this wasted white space. So we're going to put a picture here. Going to put a castle on an Ullapa in Scotland, and then now by moving everything down, now everything's close to your thumb. And you can visually see, I'm going to create cards or I'm going to review, and then you can still go back. And finally, here's an example of just some of the seemingly minute changes that I've made, but I think they're actually probably the most important changes in here. You don't have to reinvent the wheel to make meaningful change in a design or an experience, right? Sometimes very simple changes can actually have big effects. Not only is this bigger, but it also builds on, like I said, that mental model of the placement and color of these words in the sentence help you understand which parts mean what in your target language, right? And you can see that here. And finally, we've got some of these smaller areas, like the prompts here. You got the little note being different, a different icon, things being closer to the thumb, of course, and then slides with a light bulb. It's cards now that it matches the wording of earlier in the app, and it says got it instead of okay to make it more engaging. So overall, that is my quick and dirty homemade redesign of the Mango language learning app, done by someone who's got a lot of experience as a user researcher and experience designer, but a lot less experience on the UI side of things. And so, like I said, I wanted to challenge myself to dive deep into this, seeing how much I could influence the experience just as a designer, researcher, and user myself of the app. If you were going to do this for real, this would be just a starting point, right? But for me, I really enjoyed doing this. And like I said, if you have other changes or other apps that you think I should do this with, whether it's on the UX side or actually on the UI side, leave those down in the comments below. So relatedly, if you are learning a language or want to learn a language and you want to know the best way to do that without ever having to leave your home and prepare yourself from whenever you do get to travel somewhere, then watch this video next on my other channel where I talk about how to learn a language by yourself from home.